Mortyr. This son of a witch has been tormenting me for over a decade. I first played it around 2001, and back then my experience with first-person shooters was pretty minimal. Unlike the cool kids who were busy exploding each other in Unreal Tournament and Quake 3, I played whatever came with magazine demo discs. I don't regret it, since it allowed me to try out many different kinds of games, but the FPS genre was one of the genres that fascinated me the most. It probably helped that I played some amazing ones, like Red Faction. It even had 2 separate demos. That's 2 demos more than practically every FPS in the last few years. Cue Mortyr 2093-1944, developed by a Polish company named MerryBytes. They were originally called Studio
Studio komputerowe.
Yeah, that. The company was established in 1988, but a year later changed name to Mirage Software. From that point onward, they became one of the biggest players in Poland's video game industry, striking exclusive publishing deals with companies such as Codemasters and Ocean. In 1995, the company rebranded to MerryBytes, and in 1997 opened a new division focused on video game development. It was here that Mortyr was born, and in 1999 it was finally released. MerryBytes handled the publishing in their home country of Poland. The American release was handled by Interplay, and other companies such as Midas Interactive and 1C Company published it in various other places. Unfortunately, Mortyr's engine is a delicate flower. If you try running it in a modern version of Windows, it will implode rather beautifully. You can fix these glitches with the DG Voodoo wrapper, which I feel is going to become a trend in this channel. However, that brings a different problem. You see, the game was intended to be played at 30 FPS. Going any higher will cause the game to run too fast, and that is less than optimal for playing. The last time I tried to get the game running properly was 2 years ago or something close to that. A few weeks ago, after about 14 years, I finally got the game to play nicely once more. The solution? Just limit the frame rate. I used MSI Afterburner to limit the game's frame rate to 30, and it then played without a single problem. As if to taunt me, the solution was simple and obvious. I felt so stupid for not thinking of this before. Now, on to the actual game itself. Start up the game and you'll be greeted by an animated logo and an ambiguous intro movie with absolutely no context at all. The only thing you should keep in mind is the last few seconds where you see some airship thing flying through a city. Select new game and you'll find some macho difficulties challenging you into manliness. Once you've picked your proverbial poison, you're instantly thrown into the first level, armed with only a knife and your mighty boot. Put the unsuspecting officer out of his misery, pick up his handgun, and the game is on. The gameplay is pretty straightforward. It's really just about what you would expect from an old school shooter. Run around exploring the levels, shooting bad guys, finding weapons and supplies, and pressing buttons and using keys to open the door to the next level. You don't need to worry about silly things like weapon inaccuracy or reloading. While most of the enemies you'll find are soldiers of some sort, there is enough distinction between their behaviors and weapons to prevent feeling like you're just fighting the same enemy over and over. To dispose of them, you have at your disposal the kind of weapons you would expect from an FPS based on World War II. A Luger, a Kar 98, a laser pistol, an MP40, and so on. You also have a couple of items to help you on your quest, such as a flashlight, night vision and infrared goggles, and of course some reserve health and armor. The game features a basic inventory system that allows you to use these items whenever you wish by simply pressing the use item key. There's just a little problem. The inventory also lists weapons and ammo. Using a weapon makes you equip it, but instead of scrolling through the list, you're better off just pressing the respective number key. Using ammo doesn't seem to do anything, so it's just clutter. There's also multiplayer, but let's face it, you're not going to find anyone to play with anymore. Regardless, there's a deathmatch mode with a couple of maps, a capture the flag mode, and rather unexpectedly, there's a cooperative mode, which is pretty neat for an FPS released in 1999. Surprisingly enough, the game does have a modicum of plot, and it has a neat little consequence in the gameplay department. According to the manual, the Nazi forces were on the verge of defeat in 1944, but at some point the situation somehow completely turned on its head and the Allies were defeated. From that point onward, the Nazi world order controlled everything. However, strange things began happening. Constant storms, unexplainable natural disasters, and gravitational anomalies were destroying the world. In 2093, a Nazi officer named Jürgen Mortyr was investigating these problems and discovered a secret weapon, the Time Machine. It was used to bring some super weapon from the future into 1944, which was used to destroy the Allies during the war. To save the world from its inevitable destruction, Jürgen Mortyr sends his son, Sebastian Mortyr, back into 1944 to prevent the time machine from being used. The only really important thing to take from this is that halfway through the game, you travel to 2093.
To infinity and beyond.
You get new weapons, new enemies, new environments. Man, this blew my mind when I first played it. Probably because I didn't get spoiled by the manual. Turns out that this wasn't supposed to be much of a secret. You see, almost all of the game's plot is in the manual. It even lists the future weapons and enemies. And it just so happens that my copy of Mortyr does not have a manual, because it came as a freebie in a long-defunct magazine called Megascore. I feel this is also going to become a trend in this channel. In-game, all you get is a vague intro movie and some vague notes that mention a time machine. In fact, based on the little information you get in the actual game, it's easy to assume that the plot involves someone from 1944 traveling to 2093, and not the opposite. To be fair, the game's subtitle does suggest that 2093 is relevant in some way, but I was young and dumb back then. One thing that doesn't change is how the graphics are on the weaker side of the spectrum. Sometimes you have some surprisingly good looking interiors, particularly the chapels with their super fancy reflections and stained glass that falls apart piece by piece. On the other hand, a lot of areas are dark and murky and there isn't much variety in environments. It gets worse in the future since you're always in some kind of factory or military complex. The character models aren't all that great either. The models themselves look passable, but the way that the textures look just seems wrong. The colors and the shading gives them an almost cartoony look, which I don't think was the intention. The player's weapons look fine, but there's something horribly wrong going on with the arms and hands. We can't expect every game to be a graphical powerhouse, but as it is, Mortyr looks like something you would find in a Nintendo 64 game. All in all though, Mortyr is pretty alright. It has problems running on modern PCs, but they can be fixed, and you could do much worse than it when it comes to first-person shooters on PC. While it got critically panned worldwide, it was a massive hit in Poland, where local publications greatly praised the game. From what I read in the little information I could find, Mortyr was a financial success, selling over 100,000 copies and being a milestone for the Polish game industry. So maybe, just maybe, if it wasn't for this little game, we might have never seen things like Painkiller and The Witcher. In 2005, a sequel titled Mortyr 2 Forever was released. It was developed by Mirage Interactive, which was formed by Mirage Media's game development department after the company did some internal restructuring in 2000. It plays very differently from its predecessor, with more modern mechanics and a series of objectives to complete in every mission. It wasn't very well received, however. After Mortyr 2, there was sort of a Mortyr 3 and 4. Sort of. In 2008, City Interactive released 2 first-person shooters by the names of Battlestrike Force of Resistance and Operation Thunderstorm. These are the names by which most of the world knows them, but in Poland they were labeled Mortyr games, likely to cash in on the name. So there you have it. It's been a long time, but I'm glad I got to enjoy this game once more, even if it's not really all that great. But I'm fine with that, because nostalgia isn't about objective quality. It's about warm, fuzzy feelings, retrospective, and illogical attachment to the past. And often disappointment.